good to be with you. I often describe being a UU and being humanist as living in the center of the world's best Venn diagram. Vice President Vance says atheists and agnostics can't have a value system, but I have two. So, joke's on you, Mr. Vice President. There was a 2-for-1 sale at the Heresy store. I'm getting married this summer to a secular Jew, which is what we call an interfaithless marriage. She's enthusiastically embraced our UU community in Annapolis, although she really doesn't like the word church, and she still sometimes calls us the island of misfit goys. But the feeling I get when I walk into a UU congregation is the same feeling I had when I met her, the feeling of being known. The wave of relief and joy that rushes over you when you realize here in a broken and alienated world are people who understand. I'm here today to talk about that understanding. I'm here to talk about the shared DNA that binds the humanist movement and the Unitarian Universalist movement together. I'm here to talk about what we believe, why it matters, and how we can use it to fight back in the darkness of this moment, what humanists have to offer that is unique, and how UU humanists and theists work together in partnership to resist authoritarianism. Because we're living in a time that demands we be clear about who we are. People often ask me, what is humanism? And if I only have 5 seconds, I'll say, you're a humanist if you believe in the golden rule, but not in God. If I have a little more time, I'll tell them that we are a people who believe in people. We believe in human dignity, human goodness, and human potential. We believe that our capacity to evolve from fish and build civilizations is in itself an awesome miracle. Maybe even the only miracle that we need. We believe that what makes people special and important and worth fighting for is not an immortal soul or an intelligently designed body, but consciousness. Our capacity to imagine better futures for ourselves and think independently and build lives of meaning and purpose from the infinite canvas of a free mind. Atheism is a critique of theism. Its primary argument is about the existence of God. Humanism's primary argument with the religious right, I would argue, is about the existence of original sin. The authoritarian movements that are trying to drag this country backwards operate on the premise that we're born broken. They believe that we are unworthy, depraved, in need of redemption from an outside authority. They teach us from birth that we cannot trust ourselves, that our nature is corrupt, that our only hope lies in submission. And humanism offers a different story. It asserts that we're born with inherent dignity and nearly limitless potential. It asserts that morality is not handed down from on high, not residing somewhere outside ourselves, but is forged in the crucible of human experience and relationship. This distinction matters because your view of humanity determines your politics. If you believe people are inherently broken, you build systems of control. You build hierarchies where the righteous control the wicked. But if you believe people are inherently valuable and capable, you build systems of liberation. You build public schools. You build democracy. That's the humanist wager, that if you give people freedom, if you give them the tools of reason and the safety of community and the ability of self-authorship and self-determination, they will choose to do good. Not because they are commanded to, but because it is in our nature to reach for the light. Now, I know I'm preaching to the choir, quite literally. This humanist wager is the exact same wager Unitarian Universalism has been making for a century together. The history of the organized humanist movement and the history of our UU movement are not just parallel tracks, they're a double helix, twisted together, inseparable. If we look back to the early 20th century, we see the giants who built the bridge that we walk along today. John Dietrich, a Unitarian minister in Minneapolis, and Curtis Reese, a Unitarian minister in Des Moines, were revolutionaries in the 1920s and 30s. In a time when religion was defined almost exclusively by one's relationship to the divine, they dared to propose what they called a religion without revelation, or as Reese called it, the religion of democracy. They looked at the world around them, a world torn by the First World War, by industrial inequality, by the clash of modern science and ancient dogma, with the shadow of fascism creeping across Europe. And they saw that the old answers weren't working. Dietrich and Rees and their compatriots saw that waiting for God to fix the world was a strategy with a 100% failure rate. And they argued that the focus of religion should shift from the glorification of a God to the service of humanity. They didn't want to destroy the church. They wanted to evolve it. They wanted to keep the community, the ritual, the shared ethical commitment, but grounded in reason and human experience rather than supernaturalism. And they called this the New Humanism. Now, why did this arise from Unitarianism? Why could it not have arisen from anything else? Because Unitarianism has always been the faith of the free mind. It's the natural evolution of a faith that prioritized the search for truth over the defense of dogma. When you strip away the requirement to believe in things that can't be proven, when you strip away the fear of hell, all you're left with is the stark and beautiful reality of the human condition. We're left with each other. So in 1933, a group of 34 thinkers, philosophers, ministers gathered to sign the first Humanist Manifesto, which acts as our charter at the American Humanist Association. Prominently among them were many, many Unitarian ministers, including Dietrich and Rees. And that manifesto was a radical document. It insisted that the path to fulfilled existence was not through salvation in the next life, but for pursuit of a shared good in this one. They said humanists demand a shared life in a shared world. They wrote about a society that would work not just for freedom or justice, but what they called the pursuit of joy in living. Now think about that. In the middle of the Great Depression, with, as I said, fascism rising in Europe, these Unitarian humanists insisted that joy was not a luxury, but a necessity that could not be decoupled from justice. Humanism calls us to replace dogma with inquiry, tradition with progress, and devotion to abstractions with devotion to people. And Unitarian Universalism calls us to greet the world with radical embodied love. And UU humanists know that these commitments to reason and love, to the self-determination of the individual and the covenants we make to our communities are not contradictions, but cousins. They strengthen each other. When they're drawn together and seen through, they instill in all of us a deep commitment in fighting for change. We would not be who we are without each other, and neither tradition will grow or flourish to its fullest purpose unless we do it in partnership. So why is this partnership so vital right now? Why do we need to be so loud about what we believe and speak it together? Because we're up against an adversary that understands the power of belief better than we often do. We're currently confronted by an unholy alliance of billionaires, bishops, and bigots, what I call the axis of nonsense. The axis of nonsense has a simple goal, which is to consolidate their own economic, cultural, and political power. The billionaires, the Elon Musks of the world, are telling us that empathy is a weakness. Musk actually went on a podcast and said the fundamental weakness of Western civilization is empathy. They want us to believe that our caring for one another is what's killing us. They talk about suicidal empathy because it benefits their pocketbooks if we fall into suicidal apathy. The bishops, the religious right, tell us that freedom is dangerous. They tell us that our bodies are not our own, that our love is a sin. They preach the gospel of original sin that I mentioned earlier, the idea, the perverse idea, the profane idea that we are born broken. And the bigots traffic in the cheap and addictive drug of resentment. They tell young men specifically that the path to feeling strong is to make someone else feel weak. They feed them the illusion that they can be powerful through hate and discrimination, that imagining yourself at the top of a made-up hierarchy will give you that sense of purpose and clarity that you're searching for. And this coalition thrives by convincing us that we are alone. They want us to believe that the problems are too big, the corruption is too deep, that the enemy is too powerful, that communities like progressive humanists and progressive theists don't understand each other well enough to work together. They want us to retreat into our corners. They want us to believe that no one is coming to save us. And this is where we have to get serious about our theology, even if we don't call it that. Belief systems are about more than who made the world and what happens after we die. Belief systems are about more than who made the world and what happens after we die. They're theories about where morality lives, where power belongs, and where truth resides. We have an atheist in the White House who invokes the language of God because he reveres not Jesus but power. And the language of God has been used again and again by corrupt authoritarians because it is the best way to tell people who ask where truth and power and morality belong that it does not rightfully reside with all of us equally, but somewhere else. And when you ask humanists, when you ask UUs where morality lives, where power belongs, where truth resides, the answer is always in all of us. The opposite of original sin is a thing called unconditional positive regard. That was some folks who have backgrounds in psychology might have heard of it. That was a creation of a man named Carl Rogers, a humanist who created the field of client-centered psychology. He revolutionized the field because he recognized the truth that we cannot grow from a place of shame or control. He coached psychologists to see people not as risks to be managed, but reservoirs to be tapped. Because while some would say that the point of therapy or spirit-focused community is to control our inherent wickedness, what we know, what we found to be true from research and data, which we love as humanists, is that it only builds a better world when it calls us to unleash our inherent goodness. This is the thing that binds us together, regardless of our spiritual beliefs or lack thereof. We believe that the higher power we are searching for is our common humanity. And this is a story that we have to offer to the world. There are tens of millions of Americans who right now are broadly secular and broadly progressive. They are the nones, the religiously unaffiliated. Many of them are nervous to walk into a church, even one as welcoming as this. For many, the language of worship carries trauma. They're spiritually homeless. They believe in the golden rule. They trust science. They want to help their neighbors and contest the axis of nonsense, but they feel alone. They feel their values are just personal preferences rather than part of a great and historical tradition. And this is where I realize that I left the last page of my speech somewhere else. Oh, and it's right here. Humanists and UUs together need to tell them, you are not alone. You're part of a lineage. You're part of the story of the rebels and the dreamers who have always moved humanity forward. Think about it. Humanists are folks from Zora Neale Hurston to Mark Twain to Kurt Vonnegut who mocked power and oppression through art, to Dr. Spock who revolutionized the way we raise our children by telling parents, trust yourself, you know more than you think you do. Humanists created public schools, personal computers, Planned Parenthood, and the polio vaccine because when we believe our greatness comes from unleashing our humanity rather than suppressing it, that is when you build just and unbounded societies. When you choose humanism, you choose the legacy of the free mind. You write yourself into the story of Thomas Paine and Thomas Jefferson, another UU humanist, who called a new nation to cast off a king and created the original American innovation of constitutional religious freedom. You write yourself into the story of Frederick Douglass, who realized that true morality wasn't found in the piety of the slaveholders, but the struggle for justice. You write yourself into the story of Elizabeth Cady Stanton, who looked at the Bible and said, I reject the story of women's submission, and wrote her own women's Bible that underwrote the feminist movement, and Gloria Steinem and Betty Friedan and Emma Goldman and Margaret Sanger, who came after her and built a more liberated world. You write yourself into the story of people like Jonas Salk, the humanist who cured polio and gave the patent to the people because he believed scientific knowledge belonged to all of us. And the people like Carl Sagan and Neil deGrasse Tyson and Bill Nye the Science Guy who carried that tradition forward. These people didn't have magic. They didn't have superpowers. They had humanism. They had the conviction that people matter, that reason works, and that compassion is a muscle we must exercise until it tears and grows back stronger. Because if no one is coming to save us, that means we are the ones who are coming to save us. We are the higher power we've been searching for. It is us. It is the teachers who are staying late to make sure a kid feels seen. It's the nurses who hold the hands of the dying. It is the organizers knocking on doors in the rain. It is the people in this room gathering on a Sunday morning, not because we fear hell, but because we believe in the heaven that we can create here on earth. Now, I'm not telling anyone anything we don't already believe, so why am I here? I spend time going around the country and talking about these 45 million people who need to be brought into a story, who need to feel that sense of community that we all felt when we learned there was a word for something that we believed. Think about that feeling. Going from a place where you believe that in an authoritarian world that is dominated by so much, cultural Christian hegemony, that our beliefs set us apart, to realizing actually that they connect us to a community of nurturing love and resistance and tradition and incredible, incredible accomplishments. And so my challenge is for us to find ways to go out and write that story together. The billionaires and the bigots and the bishops are betting on our cynicism. They're betting on our exhaustion. So let's prove them wrong. Let's do what humanists and UUs have always done. Let's bet on our openness. Let's bet on our joy. Let's bet on each other. As for me and my house, we will serve humanity. Thank you.